Welcome to you once again now during our session. Excuse me, Sims Game 2, 3 model, design, games, animation. Excuse me, because of the cats, actually, I got a bit distracted there. Siis Games 3D and 2D model, UI animation designer. Ibrahim Dinçer is with us. He's going to be talking about develop character design on Blender. I would like to invite him on to the floor, to take the floor. Ibrahim Bey, welcome. Hi everybody. If you are ready, you can start sharing your screen. Okay. Can you see my screen? Yes. Okay. Well, hi everybody once again. My name is Ibrahim Dinçer. I live in Izmir for 2 years. I am working on modeling and animation on Sims Games. Well, we lost a little bit of time without introducing myself. I would like to give you an applied example. Well, first of all, I mentioned about the game characters, but I decided on a realistic character later on because the more we work on a model which is closer to anatomy, the better we would have full command of the whole thing. About Blender itself, well, more or less, I'm sure that you're informed about it. That's why I will be just skipping certain parts of it. Rig creation and inverse kinematic. I would like to give you a few examples in that respect together. Well, first of all, character model. It's a kid character. When it comes to modeling it for rigging, it's not an appropriate preference, but this character is going to be a character that we use in our projects. That's why the skeleton system, I had prepared them already. And over the skeleton, I will be explaining positioning the rigs. And here you see our skeleton. Let me just show it. This is our kid's character, and it is got a skeleton. Let me just delete the background so that we have a better view of it. Well, before rigging, the character modeling, an important aspect here is that modeling in the best way is the most appropriate. I mean, the arms are wide open and legs are closed, which is going to be the appropriate modeling. Because in rigging, it is going to cause you extra problems. This model was not going to be rigged, but I think that it is more logical for me to show it, this rigging, because we don't always have this ready-made model all the time. So you can do rigging on an inappropriate model even so you can just get on top of it anyway. So our character here, when we see it from a distance, the word origin, it should be positioned at the very middle, the center. And Z, the soles of the feet should be 0. This is how we should be positioning our characters. And then we could start rigging. Well, here, Shift A. By the way, these shortcuts of this program, we're going to be using them a lot. The ones who have already used it, they sure very well know. Shortcuts are lifesavers. So as much as we can, we are going to be using the shortcuts. When Shift is on object mode, when we press on A, this is an armature that we create from here. And as you see, here there is a skeleton, but we have to do a few adjustments. Armature settings. viewport display. In this, when you click on in front, the skeleton is going to be on the object itself, especially in NEMC. It's really important for you to open up an NEMC because the skeleton names, we're going to be using them a lot. So a wording is really important. And also naming those skeletons. And there is this part called access. The skeletons that we use, the rotation directions can be seen on access, which you will understand more why it is important. So first of all, the first bone is going to be the root bone, which is going to impact the rest of the characters. So we should position it towards the pelvis as much as we can. And then we click on the armature, and when we click on tab, then we start shaping the skeleton. So I randomly position it here now. With extrude, when I click on extrude and Z, I form another one, extrude Z again. Approximately, I arrive at the bone of the neck. And we've got a neck bone here. And then laterally, we can then intervene later on. And finally, EZ. I put a cranial skeleton here. So this is from the lateral side. Laterally, there is the straight skeleton. Anatomically, we are not this straight. We are not such creatures. That's why I close the character and I go through the skeleton. Here, as you see, this is the pelvis region. So on this pelvis, the point here, excuse me, with G button, I have to approximate it here. To the tail end. And then from here, the rib cage, which is appropriate skeleton. In order to do right skeleton, I try to be as close to the fundamental anatomy as much as I can, which is going to be always advantageous for you. Again, I click on G. This is the curve of the neck, the starting point of it. And then G again. And then here again, the rotation of the neck. And then this is the cranial tip. So the skeletons, naming them is important. So this is the bone properties. And here, I come to the skeleton of the arms. And here, from the upper body, of course, our skeleton will be impacted by the upper body. So from with the button E, from the upper body, I have another skeleton here. And then with E to the wrist, and then again with E to the hand. For that, elbow, the wrist, and the hand. And then from the cranial tip, I see. Now I have to, from the cranial tip, from the uh, top, I have to position them correctly. So this is how our skeleton is adjusted. So when we see it on the character, let's see how it looks. Well, indeed, anatomically speaking, of course, our body parts which are prone to gravity, they're always a bit slack. So here you see our skeleton and our slacking flesh a bit. And then here you see our hands. Of course, it has bones, but placing a single bone here enables us to move the whole hands because, I mean, hand moves in the same direction. And I'm not going to go into fingers now because it lasts a bit long because I will now put the ready-made fingers later on, the finger bones. Coming to the hips, E. And then here, I take the skeleton as a reference. Again, I click on E to the knee, and then clicking on E to the wrist, to the ankle, and then, of course, with foot, very seldomly hands, fingers can be rigged a bit. With feet, what is important is that we've got a skeleton up until the curve of the feet. With E here, there is a skeleton, and then the tips of the feet. I mean, just where our front feet sole, for instance, where it bends. Again, here there is a, I click on E and I prolong it, but here the skeleton is like 10, 11, because it is adjusted, connected to this, I say clear errands so that I separate it from the rest of the skeletons that it is connected to. Approximately, I give the position, the approximate position. Well, here, as if you are modeling with a point, I mean, with inverse kinematic, it's more like robotic movements. But here, this is something that really works the system on human character. So on joints, to give an example from my arm, a control point here, like my elbow, any point that faces my elbow, I'm going to be adding extra skeleton there. So on the knee part, on the flex of the knee with E, here there is a skeleton. Well, it has to be an independent skeleton. That's why I disconnect it from the rest of the skeleton. I click on ELTE, and then I just carry the skeleton a bit forward. And for the control of the feet, I again press on E, move the skeleton here. I do not actually remove this because it should be there with the ankle. And then the same process, we can do it with the arms. And from the elbow, we can click on E, remove the skeleton. This is our control point because and I move it a bit forward. Well, the system in here, the target, I mean, this is going to be our target skeleton. So E, the skeleton is going to be from the wrist. I will be clicking on E, and I form a control skeleton. So in general, we seem to be positioning it right. In hand screen, skeleton, all of these fingers, we have to process them one by one, position the skeleton accordingly. So of course, it's always advantageous for us to do that with certain portions because we have to have a pivot point, and based on that pivot point, we have to position the skeleton. And we can give the most appropriate movement to our character. For instance, I click on E here. I want to take it from the tip point, and then I click on E, a skeleton here is what I get. So I come to object mode, I click on sculpt, and in between two skeletons, I can get a pivot and a vertex, surface, or as edge. I can select any point between the two. When we click on Shift S, a cursor to select it. I mean, place the cursor into selected objects. When we do that, you can position anything that you want here. Again, I come to object mode, I select armature, edit mode, and when the tip is selected, I click on Shift X and selection cursor. So the object that I select, I selected toward origin. So next, the process is going to be the same. Again, I select this. Again, between two services, I get a pivot. Of course, on the skeleton, I do that. Here, we can also do it like this. We click on tab when we are on hand. And the very curves of the hand from the joints here. We can select a radial edge and click on Shift X and cursor to select. And then from the middle of my finger, I can position it. But I can like approximate it to my palm, this selected point also. Okay, so here there is this ready-made fingers skeleton, the ready-made fingers. Let's have them here because we're limited in time. And also about eye, if we've got time, let's do a mechanism to control the eye. While the eye is selected here, the ball of the eye at the very center of it, I select the edge, Shift S, and cursor to select. Here I have positioned at the very middle of the eye. Shift, excuse me, no, armature module. I should shift to that. I click on Shift A, so my word origin point, it places a skeleton here. So now, let me just leave it in the first position. I don't do anything that different. I select the eye here. In the middle of my eye, my eyeball, vertex I select, Shift S, cursor to select. So this is my new cursor. Again, I go back to armature, edit node, selection to cursor. As you see, from the pupil to the middle, the core of the eye, there is a skeleton here, which enables us to follow up objects by our eyes. Looking from the front, everything is intact. And here we see the fingers, all the bones have been named because they're going to be useful for us. Naming is really important. Here, I will do another thing with the eye. Armature to add. Well, the skeleton that I place in the eye, with Shift D, I put it forward. The cranial skeleton, I do the rotation, the same skeleton. I formed a skeleton that goes just in between the two eyes. And then in order for our view angle to be impacted by the position of the head, I select the cranial skeleton, Control S, and then I click. Well, the skeleton is not connected to anywhere. It just stays there. In order for it to be in harmony with the movement of the head, first of all, the object that it is going to be impacted, and then I click on Control. See, if I say connect here, it would directly place it at the tip of the skeleton. I mean, as if it is the continuation of the same skeleton. But instead, I order it to remain at its current position, but be related to the skeleton. Now coming to the pause mode. Now when I move the head, as you see, the point that we are looking at also changes with the movement of the head. So now we'll place control points here. These are the points to be used for inverse kinematic. So these are hand target, left. Based on the target of our hand, it is going to move. Everything that I control here, it is going to be impacted. Inverse kinematic. It works a lot in skeletons because it has got many connection points, many movement points. When we do an animation, inverse kinematic, we really feel comfortable when we use it. Roughly to explain, 2 or more skeletons.
So when I add the inverse pneumatic, and if I hold it from here, the target, I can set the movement of the lower arm in accordance with the upper arm. So we will be adding the pneumatic to the second joint, not the first one. We add the pneumatic. So the points of the skeleton connected to one another. You can also have some other actions like removing the skeleton or adding it. So in all the other areas, the bone constraint, you can go there, and when the lower arm is selected, you go to the inverse pneumatic, and here at this lower panel, you can choose inverse kinematic, and here there are some options. A target, you have to choose a target. So the armature here, it's half bones, and that's why I choose half bones for this armature. And IK hand target, I guess by typing it, I can find it more easily. And for pole target, so the skeleton, the top part and the tail part of the skeleton, the tail part will follow this line, and in accordance with that, we choose the target. And the pole target is its direction of rotation. This is a reference target rotation. And here I go to the target armature and elbow. And right now, this skeleton seems a bit weird. Why? Because here you have the chain length. An option, think of it as a chain, and it depends on how many skeletons will be affected from one another. So right now I haven't made any settings, and here I only added inverse kinematic, and in chain length, if I say 1, 2, so from the tail point, and 1, 2, all the way up to the shoulder, it created a kinematic chain. all the way to the shoulder tip. So let's try it. I choose hand target L skeleton. It now functions, but it functions inversely. So the elbow is not bent uh, to the fore, but it is supposed to bend backwards. I go to the kinematic settings again and pull target. I add 180 degrees, so the opposite angle, I say. And now when I try it, okay. So right now we have an inverse kinematic that functions accurately. And as I move this part, the elbow will be following it. So this is how we created such an inverse kinematic. And the benefit is that to pull the arm back, you can use a single K-frame as a single animation. It does that. If we had not done that, probably three or maybe even four different animations systems were going to be needed. So that's why it facilitates tremendously. And this is how we created that kinematic. And all the bones that I moved now come back. And for the foot, it's a bit different. You can have some control, some checks on the heel, and there's target and foot target. It's to be connected to foot target, the knee target, and in the back and front skeleton, they're supposed to be connected to foot control. And you can go to the edit mode to connect them. So you choose, sorry. So we choose the skeleton we will connect, and I say keep offset. And let me talk about the kinematic in the foot side. Here, similarly, like we did in the arm, we will do the same for the leg. And when this is selected, I go to inverse kinematic again. And from target, I choose the bone, and in the bone, I type leg 01L. No, not that, of course. IK food target. I guess it's food L. IK food target L. And for pole target, similarly, the knee, and from bone armature, I choose knee L. So here again, there's this weird look of it because I didn't choose the chain length. So it connected it a bit weirdly. After setting the chain length, it goes back to normal. And let's try it. And now there is a 90-degree deviation. And for that deviation from pole angle, I type 90. Let's try it again. Yes. Now it functions as it is supposed to be. So on the upper part of the food, when I move this, it seems okay, but when you move it independently, independently, the other parts will not be affected. Indeed, actually, it seems like it's disconnected. So I can go to the skeleton for food, and I say copy location. So the coordinates, its position will be copied, and from what skeleton? The leg skeleton, because I want it to be added to the leg skeleton. So leg O2L. As you can see, it put it to the head pivot. Here it says head and tail. So from 0, I bring it to 1. And now, as you can see, the sole of the foot and the knee are now positioned. And here we see the knee. When we change its position generally, the knee can control the bone we choose in accordance with the rotation. Now I zero it down. We created the part about the eye. So let me see what we did before from edit code. So it seems fixed. The look center is also fixed for its capacity. So here I want to add inverse kinematic to the skeleton in the eye. So Control Shift C. You can come to that part, and not inverse kinematic, but I say track 2. So when you say track 2, um, it gives you the direction in accordance with the normal bone. Sorry, I haven't selected the target. So I say look L. I go to look L, and the Y coordinate is our track axis. So that's why we need to select Y over here. Now, there's this direction on the skeleton towards the position I move it to. So doing all these on one side will be enough. And when modeling, it is important for you to do it with the mirror feature because it's an advantage. It cuts the workload by half. And when you do your work on one side of the skeleton by splitting it by half, you can copy it for the other side. So I go here, and all the pieces of skeleton on the right side, pelvis, shoulder, eye. I do not choose those in the middle because it's a single skeleton already. So I select by left or right. And you can also name left or right. And Blender has a great feature for this. If you name it but not add any L or R, you can go to names, auto name, left, right. It will automatically put it, depending on how you face it. So it will be perceiving, sensing the other side, and then leave the extension for the opposite side. And then when you go to the symmetry, symmetrize on armature, you will see that it will be multiplying it, copying it for the opposite side. So it was the left side, and now we have the right side added, and you can do the half of the skeleton and then copy it for the other side. Now kinematics are working, and what you now have to do, actually this is the part that takes the longest amount of time. Which part of the object will be affected by the skeleton? So in Blender, there's a much more practical way for that. So object mode, I go to object mode, and I select the objects that I want to be affected. So the torso, shorts, shoes. Let's add the hair too, eyebrows, and I will be adding the eyes separately. That's why I'll be adding the eyes to bone. So now I only select the areas that I want affected. And I select the armature, and I go Control P, and you have some options. Armature deform with automatic weight. The Blender itself will automatically sense and add weights to the objects. So now there are interesting things going on. In some big pieces, we might encounter such things. So it now has added the automatic weight. I will choose the deformed object. So I'll choose the skeleton first and the deformed object. So I go to weight paint. Here on top, you have the weight, the strength for the paint, um, removing, adding. So when I say paint, as you can see, it started bringing it to the fore. But it's not only that, Other pieces of skeleton close to the face side will intervene with the object, and rather than struggling with that, I go to object mode. So by clicking on a control, you can see which part is affected. For example, this jaw side, the skeleton in the shoulder parts will have an effect on this. So I can say subtract, and I can increase the size of the brush. Ibrahim, we are running out of our time. That's why. Okay, okay, let me do the closing. So the weight paint is about the deformed part of the skeleton and addressing them. So which parts will be curved or bent, and there will be some problems when it does. As you can see now, the face is completely deformed. You can select the sides, specific sides in the head area and paint. You can select, identify the spots affected, and then um, respond accordingly. So the better you use the system, the higher the quality of the animation will be. So now over time, so let me go to the pose mode. On the hip side, you can see how inverse kinematic works. So I will be unclicking child and also the displays. Over here in the general skeleton, when you use the bone, you can see now many points, many spots are now more controllable with the kinematics we added. Let me give you an example. Climbing stairs. It's really difficult to create an animation of a character climbing stairs, but with this inverse kinematics, you can do it really easily. It lifts its foot and climb the letters, the ladder or stairs. So this was all I had to say because I'm out of time. If you have questions, maybe I can answer. Well, we are out of time. We don't have time any more time left for the questions. Thank you very much for having participated. I also would like to thank you very much for inviting me or having me here. So I try to go as fast as possible because it's a really long process. It's really difficult to squeeze it into 50 minutes only. But as I said before, using the inverse kinematic in the right way will save life. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. See you. Hi, thank you. Bye bye.